Welcome to Mary McCorvey Experience Over Expectations podcast, which you can find on YouTube, Substack, and any place you find your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe today.
Welcome to Living, Loving, Being. Our guest today is someone whose life story spans the courtroom, the battlefield of ideas, and a deep personal connection to public service. George Leone is the founder, president, and chair of the board of Homecoming 250 Navy and Marine Corps, the national celebration honoring the 250th birthdays of the best Navy and Marine Corps on earth. Under George's leadership, the National Homecoming 250 has grown from a local event into a nationwide, powerful movement rooted in remembrance, civic pride, and patriotism. Before founding Homecoming 250, George served as a judge on the New Jersey Superior Court and Appellate Division, and as a federal prosecutor, where he helped lead major appeals and landmark legal reforms. A Harvard and University of Chicago law graduate, George was raised in South New Jersey by a World War II Navy veteran, and he continues to build on that legacy with heart, purpose, and vision. George, thank you so much for joining us today.
Mary, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I am delighted to ask you, tell us a little bit more about the celebration.
Well, it's going to be a spectacular celebration that begins on October 9th and runs through October 16th. As you mentioned, it is the national celebration of both the Navy and the Marine Corps. And so we're going to be honoring both services. And then on and around November 10th, because Marines are the most traditional members of the armed service, we're going to make sure we do special things for the Marine Corps on the Marine Corps birthday.
That's fantastic. And how can people who come, since it's a 9-day extravaganza, how can they best plan to get the most out of those 9 days?
Well, I'll give you a brief run through, if I can, of the events, and that might help. The celebration has museum exhibits that are already opening now that will go on through the rest of the year, but the main event starts on October 9th, when approximately 8 Navy ships will sail up with 2 Coast Guard cutters and come to Philadelphia. There'll be a parade of ships that's worth seeing, and they will berth and be available for touring from the October the 10th through October the 15th. And on each day there's exciting events. So there's a viewing of Ken Burns, a preview of Ken Burns' The American Revolution, which won't be out on television yet, but will be previewed in Philadelphia on the first night. The second day also features the Army-Navy Soccer Cup in nearby Chester, Pennsylvania. The third day features the Navy Temple game. Well, that's October the 11th. The fourth day features a picnic that's designed to honor all veterans of all services that will fill Independence Mall with veterans and their families. And that's followed by a very special concert with the Victory at Sea concert with the United States Navy Band and an elite Marine Corps band. And then on the Navy's actual 250th birthday, Columbus Day, October the 13th, there will be a memorial service for those who've given their lives in the Navy and Marine Corps, a parade that honors, among other people, young people who are joining the military, and then a ceremony that will mark the Navy's 250th in front of the building in which they were founded, which is Independence Hall. And the Blue Angels will fly over that, and other military aircraft will fly over. So, and then the ship touring continues on for the next 2 days. I would say, Mary, that it partly depends on what people are interested in, but if they really want to see the ships come in, that is worth seeing. That you should be here on October the 9th. But the bulk of the events are on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, unless you're a sporting fan, in which case you'd want to be here a little earlier to see the soccer games.
That's a great rundown, George. Thank you. So what inspired you to come up with Homecoming 250? And why did you choose that particular name?
Well, when I retired from the bench, I wanted to get involved in the semi-quincentennial of the United States. And I wanted to also honor those who'd served in the military, and came up with...
I'm sorry to interrupt you just for a second.
Sure.
But can you please describe what the semi-cinquentennial is for those who don't quite get that word yet?
Well, I got this job because I could pronounce semi-quincentennial, which is actually made up Latin, stands for half of 500 years. In other words, 250 years. So it's the 250-year celebration of the country is coming up in 2026, but the armed services were founded before the country was, because that's how it became a country, was that it could defend itself and fight for its independence. And so I wanted to make sure that we celebrated the birth in 1775 of the Navy and the Marine Corps, and that the best place to do so was in their birthplace. So with all those ideas, I came up with an idea of a great way to celebrate the Navy 250th. My wife said that was a very good idea, which she does not say very often. And so I took that idea out to other people, and they all agreed it was a great idea. And we came up with a great idea from the Marine Corps and went from there.
And that was how long ago?
That was in late 2020, early 21.
Oh my goodness. So during COVID is the time where you really did all of the germination for this.
A lot of that work did happen during COVID. Yes, it was a nice thing to be able to focus on in a difficult time.
Yeah, I can imagine it was. So as a founder, and you founded Homecoming 250, and so as a founder and other founders that I've spoken with and my own experience as a founder, one thinks of an idea and one cogitates on it for a little bit and then decides to do it, right? What you decided to do is one grand operation, my friend. So what was it that ticked you, the straw that broke the camel's back, and you said, oh my goodness, Margie, this is his wife's name, Margie, I am going to do this?
Well, I think once I had Margie's okay, I was pretty well off. And we thought about the idea, and we came up with the idea, by the way, of Homecoming 250 because we wanted this not just to be any celebration. It's a celebration of the services coming back to their birthplace. And that it's not just purely military in nature. It is a salute and a recognition of the importance of this region to their history and also their importance to the country. So I went out with this idea, and I think the thing that convinced me that I was on the right track was I eventually reached out to a former Secretary of the Navy who lives in the area. And I presented this idea to him, and I said, I'd like to get a couple of Secretary of the Navy to endorse this, and would you be one of them? And he said, I would, but why stop with two? Why not just keep going? And so I went out and eventually spoke to every living Secretary of the Navy, which meant that I talked to Lyndon Johnson, Secretary of the Navy, who at the time was 100 years old and is now 103.
Oh my gosh.
And when I convinced all of them, I thought I must be doing a good job, and it was a good idea, and it was worth pursuing.
Well, that's certainly a strong indicator that, yes, you're on the right track. So those were very early days, and thank goodness, that SecNav, as they like to call them, is still alive and will be kicking, I'm sure, when the celebration comes around in just a few months. So those were the very early days of Homecoming 250. Tell us what happened as you were going along the way. What was your experience in going beyond that point? You knew, yes, this is what I'm going to do, Margie. And she said, and what has she said to you, George? She said it repeatedly, right? At this point in time, she said something about this is a full-time, non-paid job, right?
Right. That's what it's turned into be, and more than that even. But she's been a tremendous support all the way through.
Oh, I know she has.
And a lot of people have, it's not a one-man show here. We went to the Battleship New Jersey, which is nearby, and that's a museum, and they signed on, and then we've just gotten great volunteers, which one of whom is Mary.
Yes, full disclosure.
Yes.
I definitely am a volunteer.
Right. So we're a volunteer organization, and we just kept growing, and then we went to the Navy and the Marine Corps, And working our way up the military bureaucracy was very difficult. And we eventually convinced the head of Navy History at Heritage Command, and he convinced the Chief of Naval Operations. And then it took a long time to jump to convincing the Secretary of the Navy in the previous administration. But we did that, and now we've convinced the Secretary of the Navy in this administration. And so it's been a long process, but with a lot of help from a lot of people, including the Navy and Marine Corps. They've been most supportive and excited.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there was a planning meeting here in Philadelphia just yesterday, and the room was filled. There were probably, a couple of hundred people in there. And everyone, the energy was so high in the room, and everyone was there to plan what George started 5 years ago. And that was just such an amazing experience, George, and to see so many people come together to one after another saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. It had to be really quite an experience for you, having really gone through the process for 5 years to now be seeing you're at the top of the mountain and you're about to crest the summit.
Well, it was quite an experience, although I have a character flaw, I guess, which you pointed out to me in the past, Mary, which is that when something goes well, I think about the next problem that I have to solve. And so I've been moving on to the next thing. But no, it was the Navy and the Marine Corps are giving every indication that they want this to be a spectacular event that salutes those who have served, salute those who are going to serve, salute those who are serving now, and really will serve as the grand opening event for the semi-quincentennial celebrations of the United States.
Yes. And another thing that came up yesterday is that the Navy has really, quite a bit of experience in these types of events, right? So they do Fleet Week in New York and Fleet Week in San Diego. So these types of events are normal for them. This just happens to be the one and only 250th birthday celebration. So what we saw with the Army celebration in Washington, D.C., was really quite an extravaganza as well, and it cost quite a bit of money. And so I do want to talk with you about the funding for this. But the Navy has already planned for all of that for their side, right? And so the public dollars that are already being spent are dedicated to the 250th. So it's a little bit of a different breed of cat than the Army celebration. This, I say, is an Army veteran who really loves the Army. But I do want to point out that the funding for this particular celebration comes from funds you've raised and also what the Navy had already allocated.
Right. Yeah, this is a different breed of cat. Actually, it's a different breed of cat than what the Navy normally does, in the sense that the Navy does Fleet Weeks. This is larger than a Fleet Week and is growing larger than even was a few weeks ago. And also, the Marines have an equal stake in this, which is not the norm for the Navy. And the Marines have Marine Weeks, the Navy has Navy Weeks, they do Fleet Weeks, but the Navy still predominates in those. This is supposed to be an equal partnership between the Navy and Marine Corps. And so that's new for them. But you're right, this is not like the Army celebration in D.C. in a sense. First off, that was almost all done by the Army. It was not our, well, I'll say it the other way around. Our event was a grassroots event. This was planned by volunteers. It was planned in Philadelphia. It was planned to be to bring people together, but have lots of different organizations participate. So we've been working with museums, and we've been working with veterans groups, and we've been working with all sorts of people. So the Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps are coming, and they're bringing their assets, and they're paying to bring their assets. They're not paying for anything else. And they're guests at our party for them. Mm-hmm. And we do have to raise the money to pay for everything other than their assets. And that's a lot. So if we're doing a picnic for veterans, we're paying for the picnic for veterans. When we're doing a parade, we're paying for the parade. The military may march in the parade or appear at the picnic, but they're not paying for it. And similarly, if we do a big concert with the Navy and Marine Corps bands, when we do that, we'll be paying for all the production of that concert. They're just appearing in it. And that's an appropriate way to treat them. There's a lot of important things that the Navy and Marine Corps have to spend money on to defend us and defend the free world. We don't want to try to divert that. We want their assets to come here so people can see them. And by assets, I mean the planes and ships and hovercraft and silent drill platoon and bands and so forth. We want people to see the wonderful things our Navy and Marine Corps are doing, but we are throwing a party for them. It's not them throwing a party for themselves.
Yes. And I think that's really important for the public to know. And so thank you very much for your leadership in that area. And one of the questions that I have is, well, let's first talk about, what are the lessons that you learned along the way? And then after that, I would like to talk about how you raised the funding.
All right. Well, the lessons that I've learned a lot of lessons. Other than having a deep, abiding interest in the military, this was not what I did in my career. This is very different from being a judge or a prosecutor or a lawyer. And so I'm learning all sorts of things about how to bring people together, how to motivate people, how to motivate myself to keep up with the great people I'm working with, how to inspire people to get interested in this. And it's been really a wonderful experience for me. Not that's why I'm doing it, but it is this side benefit of doing it. And fundraising is not fun, I have found. And it's funny because I was in my career in jobs where I was barred by statute from being engaged in fundraising for 40 years. And now that's my main job other than organization. And so I've learned that really the best way to do that is to show people what a great event this is and encourage them to be part of it, and then they come forward. And so we've gotten individual donations from very kind people, both veterans and non-veterans. We've gotten donations or sponsorships from corporations who are either from this area and want to see the area celebrate its great history, or who just support the military throughout the nation. And I have gotten some support from foundations and even from public entities like the city of Philadelphia. And I've learned a lot about how politics works, because I didn't really do that when I was in my previous jobs, and now I'm talking to politicians all the time. And it's been a real education. But overall, there's been ups and downs, but overall people have been wonderful, and it's been a pleasure to be partnering with them.
And I will say that in my limited interactions with you and politicians, they have been very supportive in trying to figure out what to do to support this grassroots effort. And, understanding that it was coming from the community and the community that they serve as well. So that part of it has been an interesting learning for you, but also one that, you had something great that you were bringing to the fore.
I'm old enough to remember the bicentennial of the United States back in 1976, which was a grand celebration with lots of events that brought people into cities, or go to Philadelphia or Washington to see grand events. And I figured out early on that's not where this was headed. It was going to be very low key. And there's a place for the things that are being done that are low key, but there's a place for a grand celebration. It's like not having a birthday party for your birthday. And so we wanted to make sure there was a really great celebration. And I think we're going to achieve that with this in a way that will not achieve, except for July 4th, which I think there'll be grand celebrations, there's not going to be many other things like ours. Ours is a great opening event for 2026. And it was really a great reason for people to travel to Philadelphia, not just the people who are here, to come to this celebration, because it's a once in a generation or lifetime event.
What is if you had to name the first and foremost challenge that you've had in the last 5 years, what would it be?
I have to name two, and I'm sorry about that.
Okay. No, that's okay.
The first one is fundraising, just because it was initially difficult to convince people this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And even though it's clearly going to happen now, it's still difficult with economic times and things happening now to convince people that they should be putting money into this. Many people have done it, and some have done it very kindly and generously, but it is, it's tough to convince people to rise above the situation that they themselves are in and say, yes, this is something I really want to have happen. And the other one is planning, because this is a group effort. It has 2 cities at least, has 2 states at least. It has 2 armed services, many organizations. It's been often difficult to have all that planning go forward. And I really do appreciate the efforts and to be coordinated. And I appreciate the efforts of the Navy and Marine Corps that have made to get that planning started earlier than they would normally do, because it's a big event, and to coordinate with us. And I really appreciate all the efforts of the folks who are volunteers and the people we've had to hire to help us to try to make this planning work. But those are the 2 principal ones.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I'm going to challenge you on the other side. What is the high point of the last 5 years?
Well, I still have on my cell phone the recording of the person from the Navy who called me and told me that this was going to be their national 250th celebration. That was in 2022. I never deleted that voicemail. And that was a real high point, because it meant that at least one of the services had signed on. And it's been there have been high points every year where we do galas every year. And to see all the Navy folks come and be so excited, and the Marine Corps folks come and be excited, and to see everyone working with each other, that's been a real great reward after a lot of sitting at computer screens mm-hmm. and emailing and calling people. It's really great to have people come and say, yes, this is going to be wonderful.
That's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you just did mention the galas. So there are 2 galas coming up, one for the Navy in October and one for the Marines in November. So how can people get tickets?
Well, they're both wonderful events. The Navy 250 Gala will be on October the 11th. I was just actually at the tasting for the food. The food's going to be great. So these are 2 wonderful events that I think your listeners will be very interested in. And they're both very historic, because the Navy 250 Gala is going to be at the National Constitution Center, looking out at the birthplace of the Navy, Independence Hall, on October the 11th. And the Marine Corps birthday ball is going to be in the same ballroom where the first Marine Corps birthday ball was held by Commandant Lejeune in 1925. So we're calling it the 100th Marine Corps birthday ball, because this is where the Marine Corps birthday ball tradition got started. And they're both in these historic venues, and they are both going to be lovely balls. And so in terms of getting tickets, 2 thoughts. One is, because they're both going to be very popular events, I encourage you, when you see this, to immediately go on our website and try to get yourself a ticket for these events, because they will almost certainly both sell out. And the second is that they are both being done befitting the occasion. So they're both very nice balls and very nice historic locations. They're not inexpensive. I apologize for that, but this whole event, the Navy and Marine Corps 250th, these are the only 2 things that we're running that you have to pay for. Everything else is free. So the galas have to pay for themselves. So we really appreciate people's help and support in making that happen.
Thank you, George. So what else have I not covered in this interview?
Well, I think that you've covered most everything, but a few thoughts. One is, we really do want this to be a great event for our country and for veterans. So we really encourage patriotic Americans, veterans, young people who might be interested in the service, and of course, service members to come to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. It's a short trip from Washington. It's not very far from New York. It's a wonderful occasion, which won't be duplicated anywhere else in our lifetime. And to see all these ships, to see the Blue Angels, to see all these spectacular events that we are organizing, I think it's really worth the trip. So I really encourage people to come and visit with us. And as I said, most of the events are free. And we are, if you go on our webpage, you'll see that we're working with hotels to get hotel rooms for people. So we will want you to come and visit with us. And the second one is sort of remembering why this is happening. We don't want the 250th anniversary of the military to go without celebration. We really want to kickstart the 250th of the country. And we want to remind us what unites us in a time when many people are divided over so many things. I think everyone appreciates the service of those who are in the Navy and Marine Corps now, those who've been in the Navy and Marine Corps, and indeed all services in the past. This is a nice chance for all of us to say thank you to them and really appreciate the wonderful service they provide and the defense they provide to us today. So I really hope that we can all come together and make this a spectacular event that all Americans will look back on and say, I was there.
That's fantastic, George. Thank you so much for joining us today on Living, Loving, Being. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Mary.
Welcome to Living, Loving, Being. Our guest today is someone whose life story spans the courtroom, the battlefield of ideas, and a deep personal connection to public service. George Leone is the founder, president, and chair of the board of Homecoming 250 Navy and Marine Corps, the national celebration honoring the 250th birthdays of the best Navy and Marine Corps on earth. Under George's leadership, the National Homecoming 250 has grown from a local event into a nationwide, powerful movement rooted in remembrance, civic pride, and patriotism. Before founding Homecoming 250, George served as a judge on the New Jersey Superior Court and Appellate Division, and as a federal prosecutor, where he helped lead major appeals and landmark legal reforms. A Harvard and University of Chicago law graduate, George was raised in South New Jersey by a World War II Navy veteran, and he continues to build on that legacy with heart, purpose, and vision. George, thank you so much for joining us today.
Mary, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I am delighted to ask you, tell us a little bit more about the celebration.
Well, it's going to be a spectacular celebration that begins on October 9th and runs through October 16th. As you mentioned, it is the national celebration of both the Navy and the Marine Corps. And so we're going to be honoring both services. And then on and around November 10th, because Marines are the most traditional members of the armed service, we're going to make sure we do special things for the Marine Corps on the Marine Corps birthday.
That's fantastic. And how can people who come, since it's a 9-day extravaganza, how can they best plan to get the most out of those 9 days?
Well, I'll give you a brief run through, if I can, of the events, and that might help. The celebration has museum exhibits that are already opening now that will go on through the rest of the year, but the main event starts on October 9th, when approximately 8 Navy ships will sail up with 2 Coast Guard cutters and come to Philadelphia. There'll be a parade of ships that's worth seeing, and they will berth and be available for touring from the October the 10th through October the 15th. And on each day there's exciting events. So there's a viewing of Ken Burns, a preview of Ken Burns' The American Revolution, which won't be out on television yet, but will be previewed in Philadelphia on the first night. The second day also features the Army-Navy Soccer Cup in nearby Chester, Pennsylvania. The third day features the Navy Temple game. Well, that's October the 11th. The fourth day features a picnic that's designed to honor all veterans of all services. that will fill Independence Mall with veterans and their families, and that's followed by a very special concert with the Victory at Sea concert with the United States Navy Band and an elite Marine Corps band. And then on the Navy's actual 250th birthday, Columbus Day, October the 13th, there will be a memorial service for those who've given their lives to the Navy and Marine Corps, a parade that honors, among other people, young people who are joining the military, and then a ceremony that will mark the Navy's 250th in front of the building in which they were found.
You've been listening to Mary McCorvey's Experience Over Expectations podcast. Be sure to subscribe today on YouTube and Substack, or listen wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.